So I'm going to start with a prayer that I learned in early sobriety called the set aside prayer, and just do that and dive in. God, today help me set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about my own recovery, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience with all of these things. God, please help me see the truth. Amen. Uh, Okay, so um, thanks everybody for having me. It's always uh, quite humbling and nerve-wracking to share as somebody who, you know, really. I was sober yesterday, and I'm sober today, and I'm not any more or less qualified than any other individual to be in this chair or at this podium. Um, so, with that. My sobriety date is August 19th of 2014, and I have a lot of history um, with alcoholism. Mental health is also a part of my story and continues to be a part of my story, and I'll probably speak to that a little bit. Um, you know, I don't have a lot of time, nor do I want to spend a lot of time speaking to you guys about what it was like, right? Because I think for many of us, regardless of whatever external circumstances that we have gone through, uh, you know, we ended up here, right? What it was like was pretty terrible. Um, I could give you stories, and I'll probably share a few of of how I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I could talk about my first drink. I can talk about my time spent, incarcerated. I can talk about all these things, but I think the important thread through all of that was the allergy of the mind, the body, and the spirit that continued to take its way over me throughout the course of my drinking. Um, I started drinking heavily and using other substances daily in college, and quickly realized that it was problematic. I was the kind of guy who would um, set all these bars as to things I wouldn't do, and then continue to lower my morals and my expectations of myself to reach the bar that I had previously set for myself, and continue to lower it so that it's not so bad. I remember my freshman year of college. It was very apparent that I had a problem, and I wrote in Microsoft Word a contract binding myself to this contract that said that I would only get high or drunk Monday through Thursday. No, sorry, Thursdays through Sundays, and not Mondays through Wednesdays, because those designated days were for school, and the rest was for not school. And so right away, 18 years old, it's like, yo, you need to set yourself some boundaries. And that probably lasted for that 1 week until I just said fuck it, and just got high and drunk every single day. I was a morning drinker and a morning user. Um, you know, I have some very when I came into college, I was a minor in theater arts. Theater was a huge passion of mine. And I remember my freshman year auditioning for one of the school senior directed plays. And the time for rehearsal was going to be from 7 to 11 p.m. every night. And it interfered with my getting high night. Um, and so I had this passion for acting and being on the stage, and I got the part, and I was thrilled at that. But at the same time, I was mortified that I was going to lose my connection to alcohol and drugs. And I was in such a panic from that. I remember calling the director the next day, faking a family emergency as to why I couldn't accept the role, and then didn't set foot on stage for the next 10 years. And very quickly learned that alcohol and drugs were more important to me than my passions, and soon was going to become more important to me than my families, my relationships, my jobs. Um, I didn't know at the time that it was a craving beyond my mental control and that I was bodily different from my fellows. I didn't know any of the things that we learn in this book. All I knew was that getting high and drunk changed the way I feel, and it made me feel good for a time, and I just wanted as much of it as I could get. Um, you know, eventually, doing that for a long time, I just my grandfather, he lived in another time zone that's eight hours ahead, and so I would have to call him earlier in the day to be able to speak with him and communicate with him. He was getting older. He was going to pass away. And that time, I think by 11 a.m., he would be asleep in his time zone. So I had to, if I was going to speak to him, um, it was going to have to be in the morning. And 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 so at the beginning of college, I would call him at least once or twice a week, check in on him, see how you're doing. And the more fucked up I would get, the later I would sleep in, the the later I would wake up, and then it would become inconvenient for him to get a phone call from me and inconvenient for me to make a phone call. And it went from once or twice a week to every other week to not calling him for several months. And then one morning, I don't know why, I had an intuition and I was awake at the right time to give him a call and say, "Hey, how you doing? Thinking about you. I love you." And I didn't answer, so I left him a message. And that was the morning that he passed away. So and I subsequently went and got super duper high uh, to avoid the guilt and shame that came along with that realization. That was without even a second thought, without even giving myself time to grieve or process. I was filled with so much shame and guilt that I just called up my friend, went over there, didn't tell him what happened, and said, let's get super fucked up. And you know, these are all external circumstances. We all have similar experiences of things that we gave up for our addictions and drugs and sorry, our drinking. And those are just a few of mine. Uh, I continued to live that life of dropping out of school, going to a different school, waking up, getting drunk. I wasn't 20 years old. I wasn't 21 yet, so I had to steal all of my drinks from the corner store. At the time, Four Loko was a big thing. Four Locos still had caffeine in them back then. I don't think they do anymore for all you newly sober folks. But I would, 8 in the morning, go to the corner store, buy myself a Four Loko to change the way I felt, and just chug it and make my way to class. Uh, anyway, I don't want to spend too much time in the disease. I don't have a whole bunch of time. I kind of want to just emphasize that it's not the external circumstance that differentiates me from my fellows. It's the feeling that we hit sometimes when the book talks about the jumping off place that you can't imagine life with or without alcohol, and that's where I was at. Um, Eventually, after moving back in with my parents and showing up with puke and stuff all over my body, and having my dad carry me up to take a bath in front of my two younger sisters. I don't know what, but there was some sort of moment of clarity where I met an individual who took me to an AA meeting, and didn't stay sober then, but knew that there was a solution. Um, Eventually, on August, sometime in August, my parents had told me I was going to be enrolled in an IOP. And I knew at that time when they said that that was going to be the end. And so I was just going to go out on all guns blazing and just get as fucked up as I could. And got a DWI, ended up in jail, did all the things. But eventually, when the date of the IOP came, and by the way, you know, I don't know if you did this, but I would call the IOP and continue to give excuses as to why I was not going to be able to start on that Monday. And it was for this reason or for that reason or for this reason. I can't because of this. I can't. Just kept pushing it off, kept pushing it off, kept pushing it off. Mainly because I knew that this shit was going to work, and I had so much fear of having a life that didn't involve drugs and alcohol, because that's all I knew for 6 years. Um, I don't know. I think one day I don't quite remember how it happened, but August 18th is the Monday, 2014. Got pretty drunk that morning on some wine that I stole from our local grocery store, HEB. Went to the IOP, and then the next day, um, started doing the deal, getting a sponsor, doing the work. And that's August 19th of 2014. And I owe nothing but God's grace and this program to that sobriety date. I Let's see, I'm timing myself. I'm giving myself 6 more minutes. So, very quickly, want to talk about, we all have different ways of getting in here, but not all of us are able. I think there's a statistics that 10% of people who come to AA stay with it. So you look at the people in this room, look at the people celebrating time. Um, I, I don't know what differentiates me from the next individual. I don't know what I did differently than the next person. Um, all I can speak to is my experience and my story, and I can continue to pray and hope for the people that are suffering from this disease, that one day they find the solution that are in these rooms. But for me, the thing that I immediately did was reach out my hand and raise my hand and volunteer and do service work. I would go to the local Salvation Army and do all these things only through the direction of a sponsor who forced me to do those things, and my desperation to do those things. And you know, I want to mention a couple of points in my sobriety that I think are worth mentioning, especially to you folks who put on the 5D group, and I'm sure are heavily invested in this group and spend a lot of time in and out of this group, making this group possible. I mean, look how many participants are here. You guys have everything on point every single night. It's incredible. I was involved in the Texas State Conference of Young People in AA in 2016. I was the hotel chair. I'm currently the alternate hotel chair for the International Conference of Young People in AA that's happening in August, July 4th weekend. Plug for ICYPAA for you guys to come and show up. I was during that time in 2016, I was so heavily invested in AA. I was so hyped up about my recovery and my sobriety. I had taken up several positions in my home group. I had taken up the hotel subcommittee. I was also the co-entertainment chair for the hotel. I was doing all these service positions to the point where I remember specifically it was like my sister's band rehearsal or graduation or something that meant a lot to her. And and Texipaw or my home group or whatever it was, we were hosting a bingo night. And and I said to my family and everybody, I have to be at this bingo night. This is the most important, my recovery comes first no matter what, and da da da. And looking back on that time in my life, yes, I stayed sober, and yes, I was of service to the other alcoholic. But it talks in the big book, and I looked it up before the meeting because I knew I was going to talk on this. It, it it talks in the big book on page 19. There is a solution that none of us make a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. The elimination of our drinking is a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. A few of us are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all the time to the work. And I had a sponsor point that out to me, and realize that I was not applying the principles to my family, to my occupation, to my other personal relationships. My entire life had revolved and mainly and stayed within the confines of this room. And to that end, I also acted a certain way in the room versus outside of the rooms. I would come in here and speak some heavy, hot recovery shit, and then go outside and not carry those principles into my daily lives. And it took a lot of work and effort and outside help, that I'm still ongoingly receiving, um, to realize that sobriety is the foundation, and has to be in the middle of my life, but I also have to have an extravagant life that sobriety has given me. And for a couple of years in early sobriety, I couldn't differentiate the two. Um, you know, I was willing to sacrifice these other aspects of my life for the sake of putting on a fucking bingo night, because I thought that I was this important hotshot guy that needed to be involved in AA at all costs, and the bingo night was going to fall apart if I wasn't there, because that's what my ego tells me. Um, you know, my life has continued to incrementally spiritually inflate as a result of the program, and because of things associated with the program, like starting meetings, going to meetings, working with sponsees, calling sponsors, all the things that we talk about in this book. I have none of that without Alcoholics Anonymous, and every day and every night I thank God that I, was given this grace that God gave me. Timer, so I'm going to give myself another 30 seconds to wrap it up. Um, and I think the main point that quickly, I said that I was going to mention outside help, and that was a huge part of my story, and still is. Um, there's very little discussion about receiving outside help in the form of counseling, psychiatry, and psychology in the rooms, although it's discussed in the big book on page 131. And there's a pamphlet from AA World Services called AA Medications and Other Drugs. Um, this is a part of my life that's extremely important. I would not have the life that I have today without the help that I receive in Alcoholics Anonymous and through Alcoholics Anonymous and with Alcoholics Anonymous. Subsequently, I would also not have the life that I have today without receiving the outside help. I could not only do the outside help without the AA, and I can't do the AA without the outside help. They're simultaneous. Pamphlet 11 in the AA World Services is literally called Alcoholics Anonymous, Medications and Other Drugs. Um, for me, it's a huge part of my story. That's all I can speak to. Um, and and I'm just going to close real quick with page 121 of the big book that says, we realize that we have been giving you much direction and advice. We may have seemed to lecture. If that is so, we are sorry. I'm speaking for myself here. For we ourselves don't always care for people who lecture us. But what we have related is based upon experience, some of it painful. We had to learn these things the hard way. That is why we are anxious that you understand and that you avoid these unnecessary difficulties. So, to you out there who may soon be with us, we say good luck and God bless you. Um, yeah, and that's all you got for me. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.